Okay, church, so we're doing the Beatitudes, and I'm trying to get all the kids to learn them. I think these are incredibly important understanding of kind of the process and the way we really fully move into the kingdom of God and really become Christ followers. So I'm paying the kids. I'm not paying you a dime, but come on, let's say it together. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now, as you were saying these, I hope you kind of got the impression that some of these are kind of strange. I mean, that last one, blessed are the persecuted. Really? I didn't know that. Or last week we said, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Literally what Jesus is saying, happy are the sad. It's kind of strange. Today, though, we have the third beatitude, which there are a couple of them that make perfect sense once you kind of get a handle on them. And this one is one of those. It makes absolute perfect sense. I think as you think about it, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. I think if you think about this, and hopefully as I teach it, you'll get the feel of this. One of the things that struck me about the Beatitudes is kind of how progressive they are. One follows the other. The Christian life, the walk of faith, begins with number one. Blessed are the poor in spirit. If you don't know you need God, then God is going to be of no use to you. I mean, until you know how desperately you need God's help, until you know how profoundly deficient you are, God is of no use to you. The second beatitude goes along with the first. Once you realize how inadequate you are, once you realize how sometimes, even in your best intent, you cause harm, you begin to mourn. You mourn your sin. You mourn your inadequacies and your shortcomings. And as you mourn, what you learn is there is a God, and there's a God of comfort. You know, this last week I told the story of the woman caught in the act of adultery. And they all had their stones to stone her. And if you remember, Jesus said, the one without sin cast the first stone. And it said they all put their stones down. And then Jesus said something. I've been meditating on this all week long. Every time I get frustrated with myself, or every time I really have to confront my inadequacies, I think to myself, Johnny, who has condemned you? And I say, no one, Lord. Neither do I condemn you. I don't know if I can manage not sinning anymore, but I kind of think, go and do better. Who has condemned you? No one, Lord. And neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. Go and do better. So today, once you've understood your inadequacy, once you have mourned your sin, then you become meek. Meekness is simply trusting in God. In fact, what Jesus is doing is actually quoting a psalm when he talks about blessed are the meek. I want you to look at Psalm 37. Let's look at verse 3. Do you have verse 3? Verse 3 is trust in the Lord and do good, dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture. This is verse 4, but that's fine. So verse 3 says, trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture. Take delight in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. So meekness, listen, meekness is trusting and doing good and taking delight in the Lord. Meekness is simply understanding that because I am powerless, God is powerful. I can't trust myself. I can't even trust the people around me. I have to begin my life by trusting God. I trust in the Lord, and then I take delight in Him. You know, it's interesting in the Old Testament, one person is particularly pointed out to be meek. And that person is Moses. Now, if you were going to think about some of the most important people in history, in the top 5, I can't imagine you wouldn't include Moses. Moses is the great lawgiver. Moses really shaped the Jewish people into the people who would give us Jesus Christ. I mean, Moses is without question the leading central figure in the Old Testament. And through his teaching, all of Christianity is also inspired. So Moses look at Numbers chapter 12. It has an interesting thing. It says Moses was a very humble man, more humble than anyone else on the face of the earth. And the same word that we use for meek, this translation is used for humble. Moses was a very meek man. Now think about Moses. Moses, when he started out in Exodus chapter 3, was a shepherd. And God appeared to him in a burning bush and said, I want you to go back to Egypt, and I want you to tell the most powerful man in the world that he's to let my people go. And Moses was afraid of God, and he was overwhelmed by the task. So at first he said, there's got to be somebody better. And so God eventually convinces him. And what's interesting is Moses developed such a profound fear and honor and respect of God that for the rest of his life, he didn't fear anyone else. I mean, he literally could go to the most powerful man in the world and say, let my people go. I mean, all through his life, he stood up to what anybody else would do to him. He was fearless because he'd learned submission. He'd learned meekness. Now, you're beginning to understand what Jesus meant by the word meek. Meek is simply a willingness to be obedient. Meekness is simply a willingness to be under authority. In fact, the Greek word that is used here is praus. And praus is used to describe an animal who's been trained. It's particularly a horse. So a meek horse is a horse that's been trained in riding someone. They've been broken. They know how to take the saddle and the bridle, and they know how to carry a rider. Now, that's important because have you ever been around a horse? I mean, horses are kind of scary, aren't they? I mean, maybe not for you, but if you're not scared of horses, you're not paying attention. Because even a horse that's not mad at you can step on you, and it hurts. I mean, I had a little Shetland pony, and I was scared of it. It'd bite me and kick me. And let me give you an example of meekness. I've used this story before. Several years ago, we had a little wonderful dog, a golden doodle named Daisy. Daisy was a great dog. She loved people. She had a great time. The only thing that Daisy didn't like was big dogs that she thought could hurt us. And when Daisy saw another big dog, she would go absolutely nuts, trying to defend us. Well, we were out at Craighead, if you recall. We were walking Daisy. And I looked up, and there, not so far away, we were coming around a curb, was a woman. She was immaculately dressed. I noticed that. She had the matching outfit. Her hair was back in the little bow. And I mean, she was walking a Doberman Pinscher. I don't mean one of the small ones, big old barrel-chested dog. And I went, oh, shoot. Because it's too late by the time I saw him. My dog saw this Doberman Pinscher. She went absolutely berserk. I mean, she was trying to get to this Doberman Pinscher. In fact, she jerked and she literally pulled the collar off her neck. And we watched in horror as our little golden doodle charged this big Doberman Pinscher. The young woman is just standing there, just poised as ever. She looks at the dog and she goes, down. I'm not kidding you. That Doberman just went right down. You're not sitting, fully down. And Daisy was all over it. He wasn't biting. I think if the dog would have bitten the Doberman, the girl would have looked at the dog and go, kill. But Daisy was just, so, but she doesn't have a collar on, and I'm going, Daisy, 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 bad dog, like that's helping. Finally, I couldn't get a hold of Daisy. I grab her tail, and I pull her off. All the time, the other dog's just sitting there. Now, really, is it a bad dog, or is it a bad owner who hasn't trained his dog to behave in public? Now, if you would have looked at that Doberman, you know who's going to win the fight. You know who's the strong dog. But that Doberman was trained. It was, the Greeks would call it praus, using the term meek. The dog was meek in that it knows how to behave, right? That's what meekness is. Meekness is this understanding that you're under authority, that you're not on your own, that you're not in charge, that you have to work with other people. That's what praus means. Let me give you another example. I've got a picture I want to show you. It's a very interesting picture. There you go. Thank you. Now, it's an interesting picture, isn't it? Looks like some old man. And he's got the young man by the jersey. Now, I don't think the old man's happy. I think, because you could kind of see how his fingers have kind of made grooves in the shirt. He's got this guy. He's really got a death grip on this guy. Now, generally, when you grab somebody like that, that's not a friendly thing to do. I don't think if I went up and grabbed you like that, you'd be very happy. But the young man seems to put up with it. Isn't that interesting? And he's even got armor on. Isn't that interesting? He's wearing armor. He's got basically boxing gloves on. That guy, the old man, must weigh, what, $160? The young man must weigh 240, 230. This wouldn't even be a contest. All he'd have to do is headbutt the old man. Wouldn't that be funny? I'm being a little funny with you because you know who that is. A lot of you do. If you know football, that's Lou Holtz. And Lou Holtz was the coach at Notre Dame. And so that must be, I can't really tell. I bet somebody afterwards will tell me who that is. But let's just say it's a linebacker. It's a linebacker, because I bet he's grabbed a hold of linebackers too if he's not. And by definition of what we're using, that young man in that moment is meek. He has every capacity to lay out Lou Holtz, but he's not going to, because he knows, listen, he knows that Lou Holtz is in charge. And anybody ever had a football coach that grabbed them by the face mask, the jersey, the back of their head? That's what coaches do. They tell you gently your mistakes. Now, what would happen if the young man did lose his temper and hit Lou Holtz? Well, his football career, I guarantee you, would be over. He'd never play pro football, no matter how good he is, because you can't do that. You can't fight your coaches. People that fight their coaches, it doesn't matter how good you are. If you're not, we even have a name for it, a team player, right? If you're not a team player and you're on a team sport, sooner or later, you're going to get washed out, because no matter how good you are, you have to cooperate. You have to submit and surrender to the team. Now, do you understand now what Jesus is saying? Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. What Jesus is saying is, it is the people who are willing to submit to something higher than themselves. A team, an organization, a family, a community, who's willing to live under the authority of others so that they all together can work for a particular purpose. Those people inherit the earth. Those people make the difference. Every one of us has to know this. Parents, one of your fundamental jobs is to create some meekness in your children. You will ruin them. Well, I want them to have self-esteem. No, you don't. I mean, not to the extent that they're not willing to work. Not that the extent that they're not willing to listen to their teachers. They're not willing to listen to the people around them. Not to the extent that they're bullheaded and they just do whatever they want to do. Without meekness, you will not succeed eventually. Sooner or later, you're going to find out that you have to submit to something bigger than yourselves. You might have noticed that I have something here. I really like this. This is my dad's. My dad was a preacher, and he used this frequently for sermons. What I like about it is the metalwork on it. You might come look at it afterwards. It's clearly a blacksmith, and clearly this isn't manufactured. This was handmade. And if you look at it, it's clearly been used. Perhaps some of you recognize it. It's a yoke, right? One of the great human inventions. When humans started with agriculture, at first it was all by hand. And then they discovered they could harness an animal. And the animal could do a lot of the work of plowing. But then they began to work on how to harness that animal better. And they came up with the yoke. Hey, Susan, would you come up? This is my wife, Susan. I just want to show you how this works. Now... Oh, come on, it's a double yoke. Come on, help me here. Oh, Susan, they don't know us, baby. Come on here. Come on here. All right, so this is a double yoke.
I'll do this if you tell about trying to find it.
Oh, don't do this to me. All right, I'll do it. You got a deal. So we didn't plan that one. All right, so.
We didn't plan any of this.
So here you go. Put your neck under it. So there we go. You got it? You're a little shorter. So what a yoke does is allows two animals to work together. Now, one animal, so a horse, a draft horse, I think it said, could pull 8,000 pounds. That's a lot. So ask yourself, what could two draft horses working together pull? Well, the answer is not 16,000 pounds, it's 24,000 pounds. Because working together, they actually can pull three times the load instead of 2 times the load. Thank you, Susan. Give her a hand. Yeah, thanks, Bunny. Oh, all right. So, Susan told me I have to tell the story. You can sit down. I'll tell it. So, after my dad died, I got this yoke and I was going to use it, and I was so tickled because I realized this sermon was the perfect time to use this yoke, and it got lost. I couldn't find the yoke. I looked all over the house. I even went to Susan and said, Susan, could someone have stolen it? Look at it. Right. I mean, who is going to steal this? Maybe it's been stolen. Susan goes, John, I bet you put it in the attic. I said, no way I'll put it in the attic. I remember climbing up in the attic and putting it up there. And she said, well, I bet you that's where it is. I said, no, it's not there. It's not there. So I'd looked everywhere else, contemplated whether somebody'd stolen it. And finally, you know what I did? I know it's not there. It's a waste of time, but next time I talk about where it's not, Susan will ask me, is it in the attic? And I'll say, no, it's not in the attic. I looked. It's right there. Right there. Just right there at the front. So I'm happy to see this. This is my dad's yoke. But Jesus illustrates meekness beautifully in Matthew chapter 11. Let's look at Matthew chapter 11. One of my favorite verses. In Matthew chapter 11, Jesus says, come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. And then what does he say next? Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. Now let's stop right there. When he says my yoke, what he means is the double yoke, right? Because one young animal, one young oxen would learn from a more experienced oxen how to pull the weight. So that when Jesus says, take my yoke, he's not talking about in exclusion. He means together. Take my yoke together and learn from me. Now, what's interesting about this is you would think when he says, come to me all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest, that he would be talking about rest. But what does he say immediately after? He says, take the yoke. Well, am I supposed to rest or am I supposed to work? Yes. Right? Yes. 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 Let's look at how he finishes it. For I am gentle, and that word gentle, I am gentle and humble. What is it, gentle or humble? One of those words is meek. I'm not sure. I think it's gentle, actually. For I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Isn't that beautiful? I love that. My yoke is easy, and my burden is light. You see, when you're poor in spirit, when you've carried your burden, when you've tried to do all the work you can, and you realize you can't do it, at some point you discover a wonderful truth, if you will open your heart. And that wonderful truth is that Christ has a yoke that you can bear, a yoke that gives you purpose, that gives you meaning, that gives you power. Several years ago, a Baptist minister wrote a book. And I talk about this book a lot because it's really, well, number one, it's the best-selling book other than the Bible in America for the last almost 20 years now, 15. He wrote it. What he wanted to do is help us understand what it meant to be a purpose-driven person, what it meant to be a person who really does carry the yoke of Christ, who takes it up every day and works with Christ. And of course, the guy's name is Rick Warren, of course, and the book is The Purpose-Driven Life. If you haven't read it, you need to read it. If you have read it, you probably need to read it again if you're struggling with your purpose. Because Rick Warren talks about how our purpose is worship. So right now today, you're living out part of your worship. It's personal Bible study. It's finding a group of men or women who encourage you and help you weekly in your Christian walk. It's learning your gifts, and it's learning how to serve and be in ministry to all the world. And so as we pick up our yokes, as we begin to live for Christ, we discover a wonderful truth. And the wonderful truth is we're not in charge, right? Everybody say, I'm not in charge. Now, ladies, don't elbow your husbands. Husbands, don't elbow your wives. But it's really true. I'm not in charge. I don't have to figure it all out. I don't have to know everything. You know, I love Rick Warren. Rick Warren still as of a few years ago, he was driving a 12-year-old Ford. His watch was from Walmart. I love it. He wears awful shirts. Have you ever seen him? Terrible dresser. Lives in the same house after he sold 60 million copies of the book. I mean, that guy is a multimillionaire. Lives in the same house he did before. In fact, what I love about Rick Warren, he took all the money from the book and he went to his church and he paid them back for every dime they ever paid him. And he doesn't take money anymore for being a pastor. He just lives off the royalties. And on those royalties, he takes 90% of it. He does what we call a reverse tithe. He takes 90% of it and gives it away, and he lives on 10%. Isn't that cool? He doesn't, you know, you hear about these evangelists asking God for jet planes. He doesn't have a jet. He doesn't even have a boat. He just serves God. And I'll tell you, the guy that's got the jet and the guys that got the fancy homes and they preach Jesus, I got to tell you something. I guarantee you, Rick Warren's better off. Right? Because he's learned what it means to be purpose-driven. So let me just say this. The best day of my life when Jesus came into my life. When I got down on my knees and said, Jesus, I want to follow you. And Jesus gently laid that yoke on my back. And he took the other side. And the rest of my life, I've just been pulling along. I've just been doing the best I can. And I won't tell you I'm always good at it. I will not tell you that. But I will tell you the happiest I ever am is not when I'm arguing with somebody about politics. It's not when I'm worried about what's going to happen to my denomination or my local church. It's not when I'm worried about, oh my gosh, what did I say or how did I do that? The happiest I ever am when I'm just pulling for Jesus. When I'm just yoked to Jesus Christ. Let's give the Lord a hand, because I ain't special. I ain't special. Come on, get in the yoke. Join the Jesus movement. Get in the work and start plowing the field. You won't be worried about politics if you're plowing the field. I have to remind myself of that too. Quit watching CNN, John. Turn Fox off. It doesn't get any better. It gets worse. But I can plow. I don't know what's going to happen to the world, but I can love my neighbor. I can call my kids and say, forgive me. I want to love you better. I could say to church members, you know, how can we do this together? What can we do for Jesus? Not how do we all agree, but how do we work for the Lord? How do we become true yoke fellows? So here's the challenge today. There's somebody here, you've never taken up the yoke. You've never learned the joy of following Jesus. I want to challenge you today. That's just to think. Just to try it. Just go get the Purpose-Driven Life. We got it. Did we have it in our bookstore? Get the Purpose-Driven Life and start reading it. Or maybe you're like me. You love Jesus. You've been following Him for years. But I tell you, one of the things that Jesus said is He said you got to take up your cross daily. And that applies to your yoke too. You got to pick it up every day, because it's so easy to put it down and get distracted. So I want to challenge you, if you've been distracted, if you've been putting your yoke down and letting it aside, pick it back up. How do you know that you've let it aside? Well, if you're worried, if you're angry, if you're frustrated. Worried, angry, frustrated people don't plow, right? They fume. So, dear friends, brothers and sisters, I'll make a promise with you. I will if you will. I will if you will. Will you join me? Will you join me in plowing and working for the Lord? I don't know what the future holds, but I know who holds the future. I don't know what to do about my country. I don't know what to do about my church. I don't even know what to do about my own family. I don't know what to do with myself, except I plow. I work. I love. I forgive. I forgive myself. And I keep going as a true yoke fellow of Jesus Christ. Great day for this altar. Great day to come down and just say, Lord, I want to follow you. I want to take up your cross. Lord, I've laid it down and I've gotten so upset. Let me pick it back up again. Join me at the altar this morning. Let's stand and sing. I'm no longer a slave to anything but Jesus Christ.